This is the Wait Just an InfoSec podcast, your weekly opportunity to tap into the minds of some of the world's foremost cybersecurity experts. Wait Just an InfoSec is a weekly show live streamed on SANS Institute social media channels on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The show features a wide range of guests from across the InfoSec community. Whether we're diving into the weeds of the latest data breach or exploring the security implications of groundbreaking technology such as generative AI, each episode brings you new insight to keep you engaged in the industry, feed your fire for knowledge, and amplify your value as an InfoSec practitioner. Join the SANS community and gain free access to cutting-edge industry news, cybersecurity resources like technical research, and tools that can't be found elsewhere. Subscribe for free today at sans.org/join.
I'd like to bring on to the show my awesome co-host, Mary DeGrazia. If we could get her on here. Hello. What's up, Mary?
Hello. Good morning.
So for folks who are not aware, and I'll let you introduce yourself for the most part, but Mary and I have known one another for, I don't know how many years now. We've been involved in a local conference called Cactus Con here in the Phoenix, Arizona, in the United States area. And Mary spoke there, I don't know how many years in a row. And then eventually I was the lead of the conference and I brought Mary on for a keynote. That's how much I appreciate and respect her work. So Mary, what do you do, if you can give a quick intro for folks?
Yep, absolutely. I'm in, DFIR, like a lot of people here, and I work at ZeroFox as the Director of Incident Response, where we work with clients to handle all sorts of cases, including ransomware, which we'll be talking a lot about today. So thanks, Ryan, for having me on. I appreciate it and looking forward to getting into this.
Awesome. Good. So in the world of ransomware, things constantly evolve. The threat actors themselves, the tooling that they're using, so on and so forth. And being familiar with the folks who stay abreast of all of those changes and are constantly like a beacon of hope, if you will, when you start to feel lost, trying to track these actors, having people to go to is always great. And one of those people that I often find at the top of the pack, which is typically who we have on during these whole segments here, right, is Mr. Will Thomas, who goes also by BushidoToken. So, hey, Will, what's going on, man?
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So for folks who may not be familiar with Will, first off, if you're not, go fix that. So you can find him at BushidoToken, and we can probably pop that in the screen in a moment here for you. So a Darknet Diaries episode, I just noticed that when I was putting some notes together and realized I had not heard that one yet, and that pains me. Because I'm looking at a Darknet Diaries sticker right there, like right in my, I love the show. I didn't know you had an episode. I have to go check that out. So Will is a CTI, cyber threat intelligence researcher for Equinix. And Will, do you know Dual Core, the nerdcore rappers?
Yeah.
Do you know that song where they're talking about back in the day and they're like, yeah, my my account got dropped, but it's okay because I have an insider over at Equinix. I don't know if you heard those lyrics.
Yeah, I think YT Cracker and mentions Equinix as well.
Yeah. Hacker Wars. He mentioned it on Hacker Wars. Exactly. Yeah, for sure. Also a co-founder of a group called Curated Intel, and I really appreciate a lot of the data that comes from your group, and I actually have it in my class. And of course, a co-author of SANS 589, and I'll let you kind of speak to that for a little bit. So, Will, tell folks about yourself.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I've been a security researcher for about 4 years now. I went to university, did a cybersecurity degree, came out, went straight to a UK CTI company, and we did a lot of darknet related research and activities, following the cybercrime threat landscape on a day-to-day basis. And I kind of got hooked on it, and I kind of became, just anything that was big and new and coming up in the news and bubbling up on the forums, following forum drama and all sorts of dark web and underground, the latest activities and trends. So I've pretty much continued to do that ever since I started, back when I got my first job. And it's been, there's always something interesting going on, but it's gotten to the point now where it takes a lot to actually surprise me these days. A lot of cybercrime kind of stays the same and gradually changes over time. But yeah, there's always something that kind of comes along and catches you off guard. You're like, oh, actually, that's pretty interesting. We should, spend more time and resources actually researching this and finding out a lot more about it. Some sort of like bombshell research, like the Conti leaks or something comes along, and it changes your whole worldview of the cybercrime underground sometimes.
Oh, there's so many places I want to pivot to just based on what you said right now. And before the show, I was like, I want to talk about so and so first. I lied. I want to talk about something else first. As soon as you mentioned the forums, right, it occurred to me, and this is something that we cover in class, and we try to get it out there. We in the royal we in the Intel community, of how important it is to monitor the forums. So, and there's a lot of moving over to Telegram. Can you explain just in general what the forums, and for that matter, Telegram, what they are, and how much conversation truly occurs, quote unquote, publicly? It may not be public, clear not public, but for folks who aren't aware of tracking threat actors, there's tracking threat actors through seeing their actual hands on the keyboard activity, if you will, or the things that they develop. And then there's tracking threat actors by just reading their conversations. So can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so the course that we're developing, 4589, with my co-authors Sean O'Connor and Conan Veach, we're kind of taking the approach from kind of the other angle. Like, many of the forensics and responders are, coming in after the attack has already happened and trying to piece together if the attackers are still in, or how did they conduct this type of attack? How can an organization stop this type of attack from happening to them? All this kind of stuff. But that's very based on sort of technical indicators, an analysis of malware and TTPs and all that good stuff. But what 4589 kind of does is, if you want to get ahead of the threat actors, you can actually understand what they're talking about, what they're buying, what they're offering, all this kind of stuff. And that actually puts you ahead of the game in many ways. Because basically, if you're monitoring the cybercrime underground, as we kind of call it, which is a massive thing of many components. So, you have your clear web, which is the, things like Facebook or blogs or news reports and vendor blogs, all that kind of stuff that you can just go browse to and read and get information from that. That stuff is kind of, it's going to be it's going to be not cutting edge, because the vendors have to actually go through what's just happened, extract the information, analyze it, wrap it up in a nice blog, sometimes get it through PR and legal, and then they're allowed to publish it with, redacted details and things. But what we're trying to teach is that you can actually go into these forums and passively monitor the conversations and posts and things, categorize them, extract TTPs from, something like a cyber criminal who's advertising a new piece of malware on a forum before anyone's even bought it. You can actually, they often list all the different capabilities of this malware, and you can go ahead and think, right, let's map some of those capabilities to the MITRE ATT framework, and have we got coverage for those TTPs in our security tooling and systems? So you're already getting ahead of the game. And if you're not like Mandiant or whoever does lots of instant response, engagements, it can be your own form of telemetry in a way. And so it's a very exciting area to get into and get involved in, and once you see the actual power of it, you'll be converted, really, I think.
Oh, I believe you. I will believe you for sure. So now that we have your notes concerning, not just waiting for things to happen and then essentially enumerating them, adding them to our threat intelligence platform or tip, whether that be an open source MISP or CRITS or some other threat connector or whatever, right? The proactive methodology of actually tracking these actors is important. And if the staff team in the background there can pull up the question of the day, I want to see if anyone referenced that. I wanted to get that part out first. Oh, I love that. I love that our word cloud, the first word in there is visibility. So we have visibility that the royal we has visibility that many of us don't realize. And that's exactly what Will's talking about and what he tries to teach folks how to do. And many times when I'm just monitoring, for example, Will, your Twitter feed. Oh, I'm sorry. Your X feed. Is this still called a feed? What's it called now? I don't know.
No idea. Could change by next week.
Right? Yeah, tell me about it. When I'm monitoring that, I see these notes where you're like, oh yeah, these threat actors are talking about so-and-so. And it's just like you have this we've trained ourselves for so many years now that you have to collect from incidents and you have to, use a threat intelligence platform. And yet there's this whole other massive, visible, like, just go read over here. And many of them are free to make accounts. I don't know about Ramp, the Ransom Anonymous Marketplace. Ramp, is that still free, or do you still need X number of experience points on the other forums, or it's like $500 USD? Is that what it is?
Yeah, yeah. A lot of these cybercriminal forums that are sort of run by a team of admins, they don't just want anyone coming in. Sometimes they will try to limit and vet in some ways who can actually come in and who can gain access, or they just ask a price amount in Bitcoin to be able to join. So it's giving them money and it's keeping their community a little bit off limits from pesky researchers and law enforcement. So yeah, one of the main ransomware related forums is, as you say, the Ramp forum, and that's one of the hardest to get into, really, in my opinion. Like, it does cost several $100s in Bitcoin to actually be able to join it, and in many cases you have to have a presence on some of the other Russian-speaking underground forums as well. So those two components do make it harder for to be able to try and get in there and actually get that information early from threat actors. And they're fully aware of this. One of the forums called XSS, they actually even created a sort of API level of like payment tier for researchers to be able to buy from them. So they're fully aware of. I don't think anyone's bought it. Maybe some dodgy company, but they are fully aware of researchers trying to get in there. I mean, that's the nature of a forum in general. Is you want people to come and participate. So at some point, someone's going to get in.
Now, Will, I had a question for you, if you don't mind. On the word cloud, we saw that a lot of people's resources and having staff available. And I know at ZeroFox, we have a whole team of people that do the external threat monitoring and intelligence. Do you have any recommendations? Is this typically, would this be one person's full-time job? Is it just like, this will just be 10 or 15 minutes in the morning, grab a cup of coffee, log into 5 or 6 forums? How do companies get over that challenge of not having the resources to keep up with all of this?
Yeah, being able to perform this type of work does require a specific set of skills. And that can be probably one of the hardest things of trying to sort of mobilize this type of capability inside an organization. And there's normally 2 or 3 types of people that actually do this work. One, there's working as a researcher on an internal team, as I do. B, there's working as a researcher for a vendor, like I used to do. Or C, there's law enforcement. So there's kind of different approaches you can take at it. And if you're an organization that wants this capability, but you can't find someone to hire, or you're not going to be able to give them the resources that they need as a one-time basis. Many of them will outsource it to a vendor, but then sometimes you get law enforcement operations. They find that they may want to do everything in-house and keep it all all these everything they do as a covert undercover operation. So there's several different approaches of how to accomplish this.
I came from a very large government contractor. I was there for about 7 years, and we built up this massive threat intelligence platform, and we had so much data in there, which of course led to the whole concept of when does data age out, right? When do we no longer consider that valid? Which I know we could have an entire show or an entire 8-hour conversation just on that alone. But so I wonder how much of the darknet data that I'm calling it darknet, the forum-based data, most of them are on the quote darknet, which is just connect to a Tor circuit.
We just say underground, that kind of covers most.
There we go. I like that, the underground. So how much of that do you find ages out, quote unquote? Like, is that, because that's something I've never really thought about until we were having this conversation. You know, you have your threat intelligence platform, and for folks who aren't aware, a TIP or threat intelligence platform is typically a system where when threat actors come in and they carry out their dirty little deeds, and you start to, you know, collect information like basic indicators of compromise, the IP addresses that they're using, the tool names that they're using, the file names, where they're dropping those on the system, you know, file locations and paths, those types of things. As you start to build those out, especially IP addresses, they start to age out, right? And then you go to the darknet forums and you look at posts that might be a month old or a day old, but then you look at stuff that might be a year old, and it might be from a ransomware affiliate who has moved on to a new team, you know, who is no longer beholden to that particular group. So is there a best practice in the industry on how to kind of handle that? Is it something that you've run into where you've realized that a lot of the stuff you've collected is kind of aged out in that regard?
Yeah, it can be. I mean, along with anything to do with intelligence and cyber intelligence, especially, you do, whilst you're sort of building up your knowledge base or internal wiki, you know, threat actor profiles, dossiers, landscape reports, you know, you're going to want to reproduce those and update those as often as you feel necessary, because it does change very, very quickly. You know, 1 week, the largest forum with, you know, hundreds of thousands of daily users or monthly users goes down, you know, everyone's scrambling to go to which forum do we go to next. So it's a very fluid sort of landscape to try and keep track of, and that can be a full-time job on its own, actually trying to maintain access to all the different parts of the underground that you deem most interesting. So, you know, trying to be able to sort of figure out if a piece of information or a belief that you had is still relevant, or whether it's stale yet. That does depend on whether you can keep up with the rate of change that goes on in the underground, and it is very quick. So it's better. I think it's one of the things that we try to teach in our cybercrime intelligence course is the skills of how to profile, how to investigate, how to document things properly, so that even if an entirely new forum comes along, the students will have the ability of how to do that process again, and they're going to get used to doing that process again and again. So it is important to, you know, stay up to date and just be aware of the fact that, you know, a report you wrote a year ago is probably not going to be reflective of what's happening on the underground today.
I mean, heck, you stop and think about, for years, raid forums was one of the bigger and badder places where communications would occur, and it went down, and then it was, quote, if you want to say replaced, you know, or another one sprung up in its place, or however you want to phrase that, breach forums, and then those went down, and then last I heard, folks were moving to essentially the Telegram that was run off of Pumpuri's secondary guy. I can't remember his name right now. Yeah, it's just too much to try to track, and I don't do it on a daily basis, so it's hard to keep that all in mind. So let's put this into kind of an application for folks. So you have threat actors coming into your environment. They're egressing from infrastructure, right? What is that? Well, they're typically like leasing, renting, buying, whatever you want to say, virtual private servers, VPSs on the internet somewhere, right? So it's being hosted somewhere. And then from there, they might actually egress out to ingress to you from exit nodes of certain VPNs or other services, anonymizers, if you will, right? And so one of the groups that I've been tracking a decent amount is known by a couple different names, as are like every group out there these days, which, by the way, how does that complicate things for you when so many groups and organizations track individual teams or individuals by different names? How often does that come up for you that there'd be a problem in tracking and doing your work?
Yeah, that is something that's quite difficult for people to wrap their head around when they're first getting involved in it, or only loosely try, or they're mostly consumers of threat intelligence rather than producers. So, if you're a consumer of threat intelligence, you want it to be, as clear and useful and handy and ready to go as fast as possible. And everyone says, why is there 10 different names for, the Russian GRU? you know, but I have spent a lot of time trying to help people answer this question. And in curated intelligence, we've had many discussions about this as well. And we sort of came together, took all the points from those discussions for and against, and we put together a blog on our site, and threat actor naming schemes and conventions, and sort of what are they, and what's the point of them. So there's it always comes down to, or the easiest way I can explain it is that each company has a different standard of how they attribute activity to a group. So name dropping vendors, Microsoft, CrowdStrike, and Mandiant are all going to have different ways of doing things. So whether you can it's never going to be at the same standard as each other. So that's why CrowdStrike might call it one thing and Mandiant might have 3 names for it, because one of them might be more strict than the other at how much they want to tie it all into the same group, or all these campaigns to tie to the same group. At the end of the day, it could be an office in Russia and people in different rooms in that office, or different desks in that office. So, for example, so it can be, once you sort of get used to that idea, it kind of build up your knowledge base of APT groups and cybercrime groups, and who's connected to who, and who thinks who's what, and all this kind of stuff. So I've kind of over the years of doing this for 4 years every day, pretty much, it's kind of burned into my brain. I can read a blog and almost instantly sometimes tell that this is reminiscent of the last 3 years of campaigns of a group that CrowdStrike tracks as Cozy Bear or something. So that does help, and that's that sort of work. Leave to the CTI analysts. If you know a CTI analyst or you work with CTI analysts, ask them the questions, and hopefully they can provide you why they think all these names are linked to the same group. That's a very important skill to have as a CTI analyst, to be able to explain that concept. So it's very important. Like, when it comes to cybercrime and monitoring the cybercrime underground, this actually gets a lot harder, because the cyber criminals themselves, they may have like one handle or one alias or one unique ID. The problem is they will actually change their name across multiple forums, and sometimes have 2 or 3 accounts on the same forum, or 2 or 3 accounts in the same Telegram, or wherever else. So that kind of complicates the problem a lot more, because you're trying to tie multiple aliases together just based on a few simple leads that you have, and you're spending more time trying to connect 2 personas together, or 2 identities together to one persona, and that's just as hard as clustering intrusions together based on PCAPs and IOCs.
So I've shared out. Well, now I've just shared out now for our backend team to pop up on the screen here a URL that will link to an article that Will recently published, about a week ago, Tracking Adversaries, Scattered Spider, the Black Cat Affiliate. So I want to give some type of hands-on application for folks. There's a group out there. Some folks call them Scattered Spider. The Unit 42 team calls them Muddled Libra. There's a number of different names. In fact, the very top of your article discusses the fact that, I guess maybe not the very, very top, but very close to the top, there's notes here about the different names that are used. So Group IB calls them Octopus. Mandiant tracks them as UNC 3944. Microsoft calls them Storm 0875. Unit 42 calls them Muddled Libra, right?
And guys,
yeah, exactly. We all have our own different names. So I can't speak directly to cases that I've worked at day job, right? That's part of my thing, my shtick. But I can say that I often focus on particular threat groups, and there might be a reason as to why I might get interested in them. But I've been following the Muddled Libra Scattered Spider crew for a while now, and I've been researching a number of their cases, and there are many, many things that we see with this group over and over and over. So one of the things, for example, when I was talking about egressing and ingressing into your environment, is that they love to use the Molvad VPN. So Molvad was one that I just personally didn't see a lot in working cases at day job. I didn't see ransomware actors using Molvad and things of that nature. And this particular group just loves to use it. I believe up to currently, technically as now. I don't know about this second, but we may or may not, as a community, global community, have quite a bit of a dossier on this group, right? In Scattered Spider, they love to bring in RMM, remote management and monitoring and management tools, and or leverage the ones the groups already have, right? So they, including, and I saw in your article here, and this is one that when I first, saw it in whatever fashion I did, I was like, oh, wait a minute, that's not super duper common, and it's a tool called FleetDeck. And I didn't see a whole lot of different actors utilizing FleetDeck in an environment. Well, the TTPs for this particular group are usually you have a large organization, including like a business processing outsource group, business process outsourcing group. So think like they run help desks for organizations, or they run other services for organizations that are just brought in and basically purchased externally, and then they facilitate those services, right? Those groups are attacked, and then you have downstream attacks, or if you want to call it, some people call them upstream, into organizations where they're providing services, right? And there's a heavy push for telecommunications companies to get in and do telcos, right? So we've been tracking them. There's a number of folks out in the threat intel community who have even more information on them that we can't necessarily share, openly and publicly, but it's a well-known group. They're being tracked. And I research ransomware every single day. I have a number of venues where I'm constantly getting intel feeds, and including some that we share together, actually. And I had no idea that all of a sudden, to me, I was like, wait, what? That they might be involved in ransomware. And so can you kind of speak to just the gist of the article, and this is for folks out there to know that, yeah, we in consulting, whether it be day job or whether it be just on the research side, that you do as part of your job or in addition to it, if you're like me and don't have hobbies outside of work. Like, we know this group, and we always no, they're espionage, they're data, they're intrusion espionage, and they want to get into telcos, and that's it. There's no ransomware. And then all of a sudden someone like Will's like, actually, like, wait, what? So can you kind of speak to that general, your findings and what that means?
Yeah, it's one of these groups that really caught my attention based on the sort of uniqueness of their campaigns, because they've kind of taken the approach. So many traditional ransomware attacks, obviously, many of them start only one of 3 or 4 ways, phishing via mouse spam that drops a loader and then drops Cobalt Strike, and then they just go from there. Or RDP brute forcing, and they drop Mimikatz and then get credentials and go from there. Or they compromise an application. It's only a handful of ways that probably 90% of ransomware operators actually use to get in. But this group kind of changed the game a little bit. They sort of originated from, if some of the listeners have ever heard of OG users, where people sort of fight for handles of social media websites. So imagine you're on Instagram or Twitter and your handle is @cat, C-A-T. Now, that's a very valuable handle on the underground, because if you compromise that handle, you can sell it to someone else. So it hasn't really cost you anything, but you've managed to obtain this very, very valuable, basically commodity on the internet. And some of the techniques that these threat actors will use to get those handles is via, SIM swapping and voice phishing, and all these kind of social engineering tricks that kind of convince someone to hand over their credentials or give access to their account. Now, that's kind of very far removed from what Scattered Spider is today. And there's no direct correlation between one threat actor who's done that specific type of attack, but the TTPs and people discussing how to do those types of attacks and people documenting those types of attacks, the TTPs remain consistent, because what Scattered Spider does is they send phishing text messages to their targets. They get you to log in, provide your credentials. Then, even if you use an SSO, single sign-on provider like Okta, then normally there's some sort of multi-factor authentication to stop people from just getting your email and password and logging in. What Scattered Spider can do is what they do called multi-factor authentication fatigue attacks. So once they've got your email and password, then they will try to log in, and then they will text you and say, "We are the IT team. Please, can you provide your code? We need to check your account," or something like that. Change settings in your account. They use all these various different lures, like your employment status has been terminated, or your schedule has changed. All these kinds of things to get people to click on the SMS text and log in, and then provide the code, collect the code from the SMS text, log into their account, and go from there. And the rest of that's just the beginning of their attack. And that will also include sometimes phoning up the employees and pretending to be the target's IT team and trying to social engineer them, and almost like scammers do, traditional sort of fraud, banking fraud scammers will prey on elderly people and get them to install an RMM tool and manipulate their system from there and get them to transfer money to their account, all this kind of stuff. Those kinds of TTPs are what Scattered Spider's doing. And it's kind of funny because these aren't sort of very sophisticated attacks. These aren't, they haven't spent thousands or hours and hours trying to develop and hone these techniques. They've not developed an entire botnet, like TrickBot or something, or Emotet. They're just sort of doing it one at a time, being able to send out waves of SMS messages and wait until someone falls for it, and then they're in. So this is the interesting thing, is because they're, like I explained, their techniques are very unique to them. The fact that there's been several occasions where a company was breached and when the company disclosed the TTPs, they say that they sort of describe very similar but almost identical to what I just said. Really, they use SMS messages. The phishing link poses as a SSO login portal. They use MFA fatigue, and they use an RMM tool. All this kind of stuff. Like, those are still consistent. And then eventually, a company some of you may have heard of, Reddit, was attacked. They disclosed and shared the TTPs like any good company should, in my opinion. And again, it sort of lined up with Scattered Spider. So many of us who tracked this group sort of suspected it was them. And then eventually, this was in about February earlier this year, in June, the Black Cat ransomware group, who's sort of data theft extortion, they have many affiliates, and primarily go target an organization, launch ransomware, steal data. If they don't pay, leak it to the darknet site. Very common TTP. Well, Reddit appeared on Black Cat's site, so now that's like our first indicator that they are connected. And then the second part, the Canadian government actually put out an advisory saying there's been more Black Cat attacks, and these TTPs that I just described are also showing up again. So, all the evidence is kind of pulling together that Scattered Spider has now changed from traditional data extortion to ransomware attacks.
I know there's many people out there who are going, how do you keep that all together? That's a lot. So thank you, Will, for explaining that. For folks who did not yet check out the article, check it out. It is for528.com/tracking. I just made a shortened URL. Oh, that's cute. I forgot you have your 589. Do you have a shortener yet for 589?
I think we do, actually. Yeah.
Oh, then I feel like
thanks for
stealing my thunder, Ryan.
No, it's all good, man.
All right.
I don't think we're using it yet. We'll get on that.
I figured we could talk for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, but we need to wrap up here. Thank you very much. Really, really appreciate you coming on the show, on the episode, and hanging out. So, folks, you can find Will over at BushidoToken. It's actually right there on the screen. Let's see, right? Boop. So right there in his name. Yeah, there you go. And then also his blog, I'll call it a blog website, BushidoToken.net. Check him out. Will, you have any final words?
Thank you. No, thanks so much for bringing me on. And you can always count on me to talk about ransomware for as long as you like.
Awesome. All right. I'm sure we'll work together going forward. So thank you for showing up today and hanging out. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Have a good.
All right. So a whole lot that goes into tracking ransomware actors and understanding how actors are evolving and the affiliates who work with the core operators move from one group to the next. And if you don't have that capability within your organization, it's definitely something you want to start to build out. And if you need to know how to do that, then Will and his crew over at Curated Intelligence, for example, is a great place to go and to follow to learn more about it. So moving to our next segment of the day, ransomware is all about psychological pressures. And we're going to see John Scott, and he's going to talk about some of the psychological pressures, and I'll comment on them shortly after, because it's the whole game. It's really the whole thing. So let's go check them out.
Hey everyone, I'm John Scott. I'm a SANS instructor on Leadership 433, which is all about managing human risk. And I know today's topic is ransomware. SANS has got a very strong roster of people who can talk about the technical aspects. But what I thought I'd like to share with you today are some of the either societal or psychological impacts of a ransomware attack. Because one of the things that we're seeing over the last 2-3 years especially is an increasing number of attacks on the more poorly defended organizations. So banks, big technology firms, they tend to be pretty good at dealing with ransomware. But we're seeing more and more attacks, you could call it the low-hanging fruit, going after healthcare, going after education, even going after local government. And that's true both in the UK and in the US. And I think that has a really interesting couple of things to talk about, especially in terms of what we do about it. Number one, which I want to deal with there first and foremost, is the normalization of criminality. We assume that most people will pay a ransomware. So here's a question for you. You can add this in the chat if you like. Do you think we should ever ban ransomware payments? Should the government step in and say it is illegal to ban ransomware, to pay a ransom? Because we know that paying ransoms encourages more ransomware. And anyone who's done any work with law enforcement will be able to tell you that we also know that the money that is paid in ransomware payments can be used to fund many other different things. It goes into organized crime, and it can have a massive effect on our society. So number one, by paying ransomware, we normalize criminality. Ransomware has a psychological effect as well. So if you think about it, when we have a ransomware attack in an organization, what happens? Well, first and foremost, our cybersecurity staff have to work an awful lot harder to remediate the issue, whether that be restoring everything from backup, or for whether it's building new machines or distributing them or whatever, let alone whether the data is going to be released by the criminals or not. And ransomware attacks can take a very long time to resolve. When I worked for a bank, we were asked about how long it would take us to resolve a ransomware attack on a critical system. And we said, we could probably be certain this had been fixed in a few months, as in we could be absolutely certain there was no traces left. The people in the banking area looked crestfallen at that and said, our alternate processing plans, the thing we will do instead, they're designed to carry us for days, not months. So whenever there is an attack with a long-reaching impact, we have to think about the pressures that our staff are being put under, not just the IT and security staff who are fixing it, but also the other staff who are having to deal with alternate ways of doing things until systems can be restored. On a more societal level, we see downstream effects as well as the direct effects of ransomware. If a hospital is attacked, then appointments, non-essential appointments, tend to get deprioritized, which has an effect on people's quality of life. In Hackney, a UK government, local government area in the UK, the property prices were actually depressed after their local council were hacked because of the inability of that council to deal with things like land registry searches. So sales of houses couldn't go through. When you think about how stressful buying a house is, ransomware could just add to that stress. And then there's the quality of life. You think about all the services that your local government or your hospital or your schools provide. Any money that is going into fixing the ransomware is being taken away from some other service. The final thing, most interestingly, I think, was a lack of trust in government. There was a hack of a Dusseldorf hospital in the year 2020, and a study was done immediately afterwards. And they found out that 32% of people who responded, out of about 700 people, 32% said that there was a near total lack of confidence in their government to protect them. So what can we do about it? Well, first and foremost, I think places like LinkedIn and Twitter are rife with backseat CISOs and vulture vendors jumping in to say, hey, we would have done that better, or we would have fixed that. So maybe we need to take, as a security professional, we need to take a step back, relax, and just say, let's let the dust settle. Secondly, again, from a security and an IT perspective, we need to work to building more resilient organizations. So we actually need to build organizations and systems that can recover from these things, not just stop them, but actually when they're infected, recover. And then finally, and this is very much a lesson of Leadership 433, the course that I teach, we need to make sure that our staff and our colleagues are trained in what ransomware looks like, how it can be stopped, and most importantly, if an infection is found or if it's even suspected, what to do and where to report. So what do you think? How much effect does ransomware have on us? Leave something in the comments. Thanks.
Thank you to John Scott for those notes. I once worked in a call center. Actually, was a technical trainer in a call center for many years while going to school. And every once in a while, we would have a total power outage, just total power outage. Everything would go down. Generators would go down. Everything would go down. The only thing that wouldn't go down was like the tertiary power generators for some reason, which ran the phones. So the phones would work, but the computers wouldn't work at all. So all your flow charts, all your tooling, all the things you need to look up customers' information, like, hi, who are you? What type of account do you have? And what trouble are you having today? None of that would work. And it would be pen and paper. The fallout from that, we would have people who would then take days off the next couple of days because they were just so exhausted and just so mentally drained from having to deal with that. And it's something that we don't think about a lot. The royal we just kind of think, how does it impact the business directly? How does it impact the folks who are, on the incident response team, the folks who are part of the business continuity and disaster response? But really, the overall effect of how it impacts, like, what's that blast radius on that, right? The overall organization, it's a lot more than we often think. And so I'm very happy to have had those notes and hopefully got that into your head to start thinking about that and think, does your BCP, does your DRP, does your IRP, if it's built in or baked in, and however they're integrated, right? Does it take into account all those things? And chances are it doesn't. Chances are they don't. So look into that for sure. So our show's coming to an end now. I want to give a big thanks, in addition to John Scott, for your words of wisdom, also to John Wolf. And I want to share out, I did a little linked, that's not a word, a shortened link thing is what I'm trying to say. I did a shortened link for News Bites. So check that out. Of course, thank you, Mary DeGrazia, and my awesome guest, BushidoToken. Thank you very much. Check him out, BushidoToken.net. Next week on Wait, Just an InfoSec, we will have Ed Scudis hosting, and I'm very excited for that because that was my first SANS experience going through Ed's on-demand course. That's why I am what I am now, because of him. So we can all learn from him next week. So stay tuned. Check us out next week, and I'll be back probably in 4, 5, 6 weeks and talk about some more ransomware stuff with y'all. All right. Thanks for hanging out. See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Wait Just an InfoSec podcast. Remember to join us live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern for a new episode of Wait Just an InfoSec. You can watch at SANS.org/WJAI or go to the SANS LinkedIn or YouTube channels. The Wait Just an InfoSec podcast will be released every Wednesday at noon. Thanks for listening. See you next week.